Welcome, everybody, to the March 1st, 2024 edition of Legal Tech Week, the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation from the past week. A little bit wryly sometimes, but with all seriousness as well. I am Bob Ambrogi. I have a blog called Law Sites and a podcast called Law Next. And our panelists this week, starting from Niki, let's start with you.
Hey, my name is Niki Black. I head up the SME and external education at MyCase and LawPay. And I also write legal tech columns for ABA Journal, Above the Law, and the New York Daily Record. And I also oversee some reports and on the MyCase and LawPay side of things, our benchmark reports and our legal industry report. And I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Good. Steve Embry, you're next.
Hey. Hi, I'm Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads about legal technology and innovation. And prior to that, I was a practicing lawyer in a large law firm for 30 plus years.
Gene O'Grady.
And I'm Jean O'Grady. I write the Dewey B Strategic blog, which covers research, knowledge management, legal publishing, and everything that annoys me. And I write a monthly column for Legal Tech Hub.
I like it. I like you almost forgot the name. That was good.
Yeah, I know. Stop that. Don't tell anybody that. I've had a busy week.
Okay. Well, this is all just between us here, so don't worry about it. And Victor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal covering business of law and technology.
Thank you, Victor. And Stephanie.
Hello, Stephanie Wilkins, Editor-in-Chief of Legal Tech News at ALM, and I'm happy to be back after being gone last week.
Yeah, happy to have you back. And I'm also happy it's Friday. This has been I don't know why this has felt like a very long week for me. I don't know about you guys.
Very long.
It's been, yeah.
Me too.
And I was even on vacation on Monday still, and it feels very long.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
Probably the leap year. It plays.
Right.
That's it.
Maybe that's what it was. We
Yeah.
had that whole extra day and it just exhausted us. Well, I thought, Victor, maybe we could start with this kind of story that you had designated you wanted to talk about today, which is the argument this week in the Supreme Court on social media.
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's not the most noteworthy thing that the Supreme Court did this week, but it did get this got quite a bit of attention too, I guess. So basically, there are these laws in Texas and Florida that have been challenged for a while now. I think we talked about it on the show in the past, where requiring social media companies to basically not censor conservative viewpoints. The idea being that certain political viewpoints were being suppressed, mainly on the right, and this would obligate social media companies to not do that, or to come up with a policy so that these viewpoints would not be artificially suppressed or artificially decreased in the algorithm for top news and views and whatnot. And so the justice, so it went all the way to the Supreme Court, as most people thought it would. And then this week they had the oral argument, and the justices seemed to be pretty skeptical of these laws. Obviously, it's always tough to see how things are going to go based on the questioning, but it seemed like the questioning was pretty much kind of, well, this isn't the government doing the censorship. This is private companies. So why are we arguing this kind of thing? And obviously it could have a whole raft of consequences for just these, not just these companies, but where the discourse is heading and their responsibilities and sort of what a social media company's obligations are, as far as are they a carrier, or are they more of a news organization, and so but it seems like the justices are leaning more towards the news organization part. But obviously, we'll wait till the decision comes down. But it did seem like that's where they were heading, and they didn't really seem to buy the arguments from the states. They asked very pointed questions for the solicitors general, for Florida and Texas. I always get confused with that. It was an interesting argument, and we'll see what happens with that.
Confused with the plural of Solicitor General?
Yeah, because I know it's attorneys general, but
It's
that's
solicitor. Yeah, I think it's solicitor.
I think it's solicitors general,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it sounded weird. It sounded weird in my head, so that's why I got a little confused.
Yeah.
But no, I think that is
Yeah.
correct.
I love those
Yeah.
kind of plurals. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Makes you feel smart because you
It
know it.
does. Exactly, Jean. Thank you.
Well, I actually wonder. I mean, reality aside, are these companies so big that they are de facto governments? And are they, and is free speech so essential? I mean, I guess I disagree with the Supreme Court. I think there's dangerous concentration of power over speech in the companies.
Yeah, it's such an interesting tight rope to walk, or whatever the expression is, because I mean, certainly as a social media platform, you want to allow vigorous speech and broad array of viewpoints, but you don't want it to get to the point of being, spreading falsehoods or becoming harassment or insulting or racially abusive or misogynistic or whatever else. I mean, there's a certain level of controls you want to put on it, and so I think these social media platforms have a difficult balance to walk in doing this. But the bottom line is they are not government entities, and the First Amendment only applies to limitations on speech by the government. That seems to be pretty cut and dried.
Well, Bob,
Yeah.
you and I both grew up hearing about the Berkeley free speech movement. So it's very hard for me to believe that forcing people to suppress their thoughts isn't going to end badly. All we have to do is look back at history. Suppressing speech always ends badly.
Well, it's just for me, like when this case first started, I guess it's interesting because it was before Elon took over Twitter, and so I kind of felt like, well, what's the big deal? I mean, these companies, they have their own internal policies. They're not perfect, but ultimately, as long as they put forward a good faith effort to, make sure the news is out there and not trying to put their thumb on the scale to try to weigh things one way or the other, then it should be fine. But then Elon Musk takes over Twitter, and now you have these people getting shadow banned for insulting him. You have people getting thrown off for saying cis. You have all kinds of fake news and all kinds of hatred being spread with the encouragement of the owner. So I think at first it was a pretty easy question for me, but now but that was when I assumed everyone was sort of operating with the same kind of set of values or the same setups, the same playbook, so to speak. But now you have a different actor coming in who's completely changed the equation. Now, I mean, yeah, I'm kind of like, I'm not quite sure how I feel about it now, because it's like, I mean, I'm not on Twitter anymore, so there's a reason for that.
Hey, I was sitting here thinking, Victor, when you were talking and Jean was talking, Jean, you seem to be thinking of it as sort of a function of size, that when a company gets big enough, then maybe it needs to be controlled. But for example, Trump has his social media platform,
and it's huge.
So does that mean he now has to accept, liberal leaning posts on his platform? But maybe he does, but I sort of doubt it. I mean, it's kind of a bit of a slippery slope where you go with it.
I'm old-fashioned. More speech is better.
But freedom of
marketplace of ideas.
But at its root, it means that the government can't intrude upon, can't interfere with speech. So you can stand up in like the town center and yell all you want about whatever you want to yell about, as long as you're not obstructing traffic or whatever, or inciting a riot, right? But like, these are, with generative AI especially, and like the threat of the ability to create something viral in a heartbeat, with all these bots and everything else, and real looking videos that are not real, and this line blurring between reality and fiction. I think they need to be able to control what's on those platforms, and it's a private platform, and there's plenty of ones to choose from, and you have plenty of opportunities to get the word out there. You can write letters to your editor like everyone else used to do. I don't know. I feel like, and even they decide what goes in their paper. So I'm all for free speech, but I'm not sure that it makes any sense for these platforms to not be able to control what's on them. And I don't think they're government actors, although corporations are people now. And and then that's what it gets confusing, I guess, or muddies the water a bit, but.
Yeah,
Well, I
I
mean-
Gene, I've always been with you in the sense that I was always a free speech purist. I represent the news media in my law practice, but there is a point at which some speech is beyond, it goes beyond ideas and it goes down to pure, harassment. And I mean, just think about, for a while, all the news media were opening up, their comment section for their news stories. And then all of a sudden their comment sections just got full of complete abuse of people just downgrading each other's comments and calling each other names. And remember what Above the Law used to be like when they had comments on above. I don't know if anybody remembers that, when it used to have comments on Above the Law. They
We shut
finally
down our
shut it-
comments.
shut
We
it
shut
down.
down our comments too because of that. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
comment section was bedlam. It was hell.
Yeah, and so I just don't know. There has to be some moderation, and that ends up being a decision made by the company, unfortunately.
Well, how about they
Let's,
ban bots? I mean, aren't bots part of the problem of that kind of harassment and sewage? I mean, that's often what's behind it. And don't we
That's
have the technology to
whack-a-mole.
ban bots?
That's like whack-a-mole. Especially with generative AI and the ability to program things so quickly and change the programming and make it so that it fades the different systems, and it just becomes like whack-a-mole for it to even have a system identify what a bot is. And they can create accounts so quickly and spew crap out into the ether so quickly that it just becomes this lose-lose game. I mean, we're like in a cesspool right now. We're just headed into like late stage capitalism where everything's not real. You don't even know what's real, what's not. And we're just heading into a really strange time, I think.
But
Was
I
it-
also think
was it-
there's an element of, like, how the mercantilism, they were the de facto government. I mean, there was England, but it was like the Dutch East India Company that explored the New World. I mean, I think there are points at which companies do become governments, or they have the effect of government. So I'm not saying I know the answer. I have no clue what the answer is.
Well, I mean, somebody earlier said this is an antitrust issue more than anything else, and maybe
Yeah.
that's part of the answer right there, I think. But maybe this leads a little bit into Steve, your story this week, because obviously one of the concerns about content that's being posted on some of these platforms is that of whether it's real or not. And we've talked before about deep fakes on this show, but you wanted to highlight
Some
something
of
along
us-
those lines. Yeah.
Some of us on here may remember the old commercial with Ella Fitzgerald where they said, "Is it live or is it Memorex?" And obviously, I see a couple of us shaking their heads, and several of us going, "What the hell is he talking about?"
Who's Ella Fitzgerald?
But no, it's
Is Memorex even around
OpenAI.
anymore? I actually have no idea.
yeah. I
Our
don't
tape
know. I
recorder,
just remember.
our tape recorder's around anymore.
Yeah. Good question.
Memorex was, yeah.
But
Anyway.
anyway, OpenAI has announced this new platform called Sora, which basically will let you text in a request for a video, and then it will create a video based upon what you ask it for, just like it would create, a memo if you ask it to. The Post article gave some examples and actually showed some videos that it had created. Some of which were really good. The landscape of Big Sur, the drone footage of Big Sur was quite good. Some of it was really, really crappy or sort of laughable. They tried to create a video of a guy smoking a cigarette, and they couldn't get the cigarette lit, and when they did, the smoke went the opposite direction, which was really sort of weird to look at. But it was interesting. Apparently they've trained the system on thousands of videos, including a lot of videos from Shutterstock. And as I understood the article, it basically takes bits and pieces of video videos just like bits and pieces of written content, and then mashes it together to respond to the request. Kat Casey also did a piece with Reveal. It was a pretty nice piece talking about, where all this could go. And one of the dangers that, of course, in addition to the courtroom problems and the legal jurisprudence problems that all these present, so she made the point that, a lot of people will take these videos and see in them what they want to believe rather than look at them critically to see if they are really fake videos or not. And they're still, based on the ones I saw, most of them you can still tell. But it's so much chance for mischief. And she pointed out, the spear phishing kind of things where you could get a video of your boss asking for money that looked real, identity theft, not to mention all the evidentiary problems. And I think, we're soon going to be approaching, sort of trying to find some way to deal with these in a generic fashion, some sort of detection tool, some sort of software. This came from Kat, that may be able to run on the video to determine whether it's real or not real. And it's just it's going to wreak havoc with our judicial system and evidentiary system. I think, as I've pointed out before, particularly with judges, state court judges, who often don't have the resources that federal court judges have. I mean, what are they going to do? They have one expert that says it's real and the other expert that says it's fake, and so how are they going to deal with that? How are they going to make a decision other than, as I said one other time, I guess they could just say, oh, well, it goes to the credibility. We'll let the jury determine that, which I shudder to sort of think about that one. But I think it's going to be a tremendous problem as these videos become better and better. And as right now they don't have any sound associated with them. So once you marry sound with fake audio with fake video, now you've got an even worse problem. And I just wonder where it's all going to go.
It is fascinating. Sorry, Niki. Yeah, so I published Kat's article. She sent it to me. So that was my first, through her article, was my sort of first deep dive into Sora. And it just really is amazing. I mean, if you go on the YouTube link where they have like a 12-minute video of it in action, and like, I appreciate that they put in the videos that weren't perfect along with the ones that were, but I mean, just from a single, like, I think Kat called it like a tweet length prompt, you get an impressive, amazing video without even really tweaking it. Like, it really is kind of mind-blowing.
One thing I noticed too, as a former litigator, I frequently would work with experts, and you would also often ask the expert to do a simulation of, I don't know, the accident or the product failing, and those simulations they would cost a huge amount of money. And I was thinking, as I was reading this, now you can just ask Sora to create the simulation, right? And now you're not talking about whether it's real or not. It's obviously not real, but all the expert has to say is, in my opinion, based upon reasonable certainty, that's what actually happened, and it's a fair depiction of that. And I mean, there could be some good uses of it in that realm, although it might limit or reduce what experts can charge for their opinions and services. But there are firms that do that and create those kind of simulations. So,
well, as
interesting
an aside,
world.
It's a super unfortunate name. And I'd read these articles, like some headlines and stuff, but until you said the name out loud, it didn't occur to me. Like Sexual Offender Registry Act. Everyone in the criminal defense field calls it Sora. So I don't know who came up with it, but it's pretty unfortunate. Someone do their research, their homework before they came up.
Yes, and in fact,
maybe prescient instead of unfortunate.
Or maybe it's good that none of them were on the
in,
registry. That maybe none of them were on the registry, so they didn't know the acronym.
Yeah,
it's one of the things Kat mentioned in her argument or article is the ability to use these things to create pornographic materials, which appear to involve somebody which they really don't. which,
I was just,
you know,
I
I'm
was
sure.
gonna say it might land some people on the registry using it.
Yeah, right.
That's what I mean when I said it, when I said it was possibly prescient. But I can see, I mean, you could see, I mean, one of the big problems with this right now is that it's impossible to harness. I mean, if you've ever tried using DALL-E to create images, you realize it's really hard to do fine tuning of an image on DALL-E, because basically every time you give it some new command, it's regenerating the image essentially from scratch. And it you can't just say like move that person over slightly to the left and have it do that. You're just
It
going to get a
often gets
whole new
worse.
image. It gets worse.
Yes.
I feel
Yeah.
like it
Or when you
gets
try,
special.
and the video is the same way, so you can't really do a lot of fine tuning on it right now. But obviously, you know, as we all know, we're in the early stages of this video, and you can see in the legal context various ways that maybe it could really be a really cool tool for lawyers in the future. I mean, you need to create an accident reconstruction video, and instead of
Right.
having to go out and spend a whole lot of money on some high-priced people to do that, maybe you can just type in the details into some interface and get back this, you know, nice visual of exactly what happened. And then you have an expert who can testify to say, yeah, that's the intersection, that's how it happened, to help validate it all. But
But
you know,
you know,
day in the life
that's a good,
videos for injured plaintiffs or something like that. I mean, maybe
that's
you
a
could
good
really do some
point,
cool
Bob.
stuff.
It's a good point, because, you know, historically, because of the cost of doing those things, it was usually, you know, defendants or corporate defendants in personal injury product liability cases that had the resources to create these fancy, very, very, very realistic stimulations. But, you know, you're right, it could level the playing field, so it's now not as expensive to do, and make it easier for plaintiffs, particularly plaintiffs lawyers that represent individuals, to use the same kind of tools.
Well, and it's reminiscent of like how some attorneys started using 3D printing in design defect you know, cases where they would actually use it to create what it should have looked like that would have prevented, you know, the
Right.
accident or the injury. And that was something that prior to 3D printing would have just been an astronomical cost to create this replica is not the word, but to create whatever the fix was, so that they could have a visual representation of that at trial. So it's sort of reminiscent of that, but it definitely offers a lot of opportunities for lawyers trying to prove their case at trial in those types of matters.
Yeah. Well, speaking of AI generating things that aren't real, we have yet another case of made up citations. Stefan, you weren't here last week, but we talked about a couple of other ones last week, but not the one you have this week. Yet another one.
Yeah. The one in Canada. This one I thought was more interesting for having to pay the attorney's fees, not for the fact that it generated cases. Like when we saw the sanctions before, it was just, I mean, maybe this is my bad. I'm just realizing I don't necessarily know where sanctions money goes, but this was directly having to reimburse opposing counsel for the time it took them to prove that they were fake sanctions. And I actually thought that was a really smart penalty for it.
Yeah.
Well, they had to do it in one of the other cases we talked about last week. They had to pay the counsel fees as a sanction, but it was a pro se litigant who had to pay the $10,000 in counsel fees. So.
Yeah, I noted the same thing, Stephanie. I thought that was an interesting way to do it, and it really sort of quantifies, in a real sense, the damages and places makes the other party whole. That has to go out and, I mean, it would take time to go out and read all these cases or look for them and discover they don't exist.
Yeah. What was the Canada case just another lawyer who didn't know better, or was it what happened there?
I'm trying to remember. It's a good point Joshua just made, though, that Canada has the loser pays rule for attorney's fees, so that actually makes sense in here too. I think this was the one where, oh no, this is like a high profile. I can't even keep the cases straight anymore. This is like a really high profile, like millionaire.
It was an immigration case, divorce case. Really.
Yeah,
divorce case.
Yeah, no, I think it was just. I am pretty sure it was just the standard. Hey, we did this. I'm trying to remember now. Like, I feel like I've read so many of these. This is my own story and I can't talk about it. My bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, why
Um,
don't you just make something up like ChatGPT and
I know,
we
right? You
won't
guys
know?
are really gonna fact check me, right?
Yeah.
Was naive about the risks of using ChatGPT, so I'm assuming just messed up.
Yeah.
And again, these cases, who knows how long ago the actual stuff happened. You know, it takes cases for a while.
Yeah. David Ladd had a good piece this week on this whole issue that we've talked about here on whether courts should be creating rules around this issue. He wrote a piece on Bloomberg Law. I was quoted in it, I'm glad to say, but I thought he did a really good job of kind of talking about the issue, and he came down kind of firmly on the side of just say no to having at least individual specific courts go around enacting rules on lawyers using ChatGPT in their filings and the duty to disclose and all of that. But it was a pretty good piece he did.
And there's also just the issue of research incompetence.
Right.
There's lots of ways to discover you have a fictional case if you do what you were taught in law school.
Right.
So it is malpractice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's research malpractice.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a good distinction Joshua made that, Canada has the, loser pays rule. But even if they don't, I think reimbursing your opponent's time for this kind of thing, I would be for that, not under that rule.
Well, I think they're, under our existing rules that certainly most judges would have the discretion to award that.
Mm-hmm.
You see that in discovery abuse cases periodically too.
I mean, because there's nothing lawyers hate more than having to give money to their opposing counsel, so that might be a good incentive.
Right. That does sting.
Whatever makes them get better at research, like Gene said, whatever it takes, I'm for it.
Well, I was going to say in actual legal tech news, Gene, you had a story about it. You had a couple stories, Gene. Which one did you want to talk about? Where do you want to start?
I thought legal. I mean, I haven't been following contract drafting and AI contract drafting, but I'm a big admirer of Daniel Lewis, the founder of Ravel Law. So he is now at LegalOn, which is basically a Japanese company. But the way he described this new product, it's called. They have a generative AI assistant for contract questions. It doesn't completely draft the contract, but it helps you revise the contract. It will answer questions. It will help you draft individual clauses, and it'll summarize and draft a memo. So I thought it was pretty interesting. But when I asked him, how are you dealing with hallucination? And he said, we use generative AI, but we also equally rely on our own lawyer expertise. We've invested a lot, both in technology and in human beings, to moderate and make sure that the answers are reliable. So I thought, because I think most companies I'm talking to don't have that level of human moderation of the generative AI, and I did think that was an interesting approach.
I like them as a company. I mean, what they've been since they came from Japan over to the US, it just seems that they're expanding in logical ways, and I always appreciate that. And they're just always nice to talk to, which I also appreciate.
So Gene, does this company, does it look at the universe of publicly available contracts to answer questions, or does it just look at your contracts, for example?
No, it's looking, it's more of a, it does redlining between versions, it does contract templates. So I think it is not, no, it's not for mergers and acquisitions. I think that's when people are going out and getting, a lot of the products I've seen are taking like the universe of SEC documents to create models and benchmarks. And this is more commercial contracts that are not necessarily SEC filings of any kind.
Yeah, it's answer questions about contracts, summarize contracts, that sort of thing. I mean, he walked, I got a demo of it too, and he walked me through kind of a use case where he says, he like basically starts by asking, does this contract have a clause that covers this? And it
Yes.
says, no, it doesn't. So he says, well, would you draft me language that does this? And it comes up with a draft very quickly. And then it says, where should I put this in the contract? And it inserts it into the contract. And then he says, well, could you draft an email to my client explaining what I've just done in the whole process we've just been through? And it does that. So it's just a chat assistant, basically. I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily doing anything all that unique compared to what some of the other contract companies are already doing with AI, but they seem to have done a really good execution of it. And it's, again, it's right there in the drafting interface when you're working in the contract, and it just makes it really handy to work with the particular contract. But it's very much focused on the specific contract that you're working on at the moment.
And the thing I also like is they give everybody who's already a subscriber gets the AI assistant, unlike other companies where they
Right.
charge you like a horrific upcharge.
So maybe there's a transition from that to a different story, only because, as you mentioned, Daniel Lewis, who had been the founder of Ravel Law, this is kind of a second coming for him in legal tech after Ravel Law got swallowed up by LexisNexis. And then I had a story this week on the return to the legal tech world of Jimo Abviagale, who was the co-founder of Ross Intelligence way back when he was a 20-year-old computer science student up in Toronto, founded Ross Intelligence. And as some of us will remember, when Ross Intelligence was the talk of the town, Andrew Arruda is, I don't know if he's here today, but he's often in our audience on this show, the other co-founder. Ross was one of these companies that was just being touted as the big new thing in AI and legal research, and they had a stellar rise, and unfortunately ended up closing down when they were sued by a certain legal research giant called Thomson Reuters, and just really couldn't kind of afford to keep going, even though the lawsuit continues going forward there with thanks to insurance coverage. And it apparently is even going to trial possibly later this year, finally, after a number of years of litigation. But this new startup, and he's being a little coy around some of the details.
Well,
But it's
Yeah, I wondered about that too.
I'm going to chime in a minute about that, but go on.
Well, okay. So I mean, the idea is that it's going to try and help lawyers understand how a particular judge decides particular kinds of issues based not just on their reported decisions or written decisions that they've issued, but on kind of the whole body of the judge's work. And that's the part where he's not talking about it yet because of pending patents, he said. He gave me a little more information than that that I'm sworn to secrecy on, but it does sound like it does have the potential to be able to do more than what we've seen in some of these things. And he's sort of differentiating it from other like legal analytics products like Lex Machina, in that this is not just sort of giving you data on percentages or whatever on how many times the judge has done this in this kind of a matter, but is really going to help you, give you some insights on their decision making in certain kinds of cases. So whether it ends up doing that, and it is using generative AI to do that as well. So as always with these things, the proof is in the pudding, and until any of us actually see it or get to play with it, it's hard to say what that will be.
Yeah.
But it sounds interesting.
Oh, go ahead, Niki. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say that it seems it's a little bit reminiscent here, and it sets off my what the heck's up with that detector to avoid any untoward words on this webcast. But it feels a lot like, well, we can't tell you what it does, and it's super proprietary and patented. No, you can't take a look at it, but it's awesome, and lots of people are using it, but we can't tell you who's using it. I mean, this sounds an awful lot like something else we heard a long time ago with Ross, where nobody ever got to actually look at it or try it, and so I feel like it's the exact same PR playbook.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this plays out. Color me a little bit simply because of that.
It did sound a little
I
familiar.
was-
Yep.
I thought it was kind of interesting because as I read your piece and the quotes, he was sort of saying, well, we're going to tell you why a judge rules the way he or she does. And that sounded a lot like Predicta, the company that looks at all the background of the judge and all that.
Yeah.
And but then he said, but it's not like Predicta. So I did like, how are you going to get the judge's decisions from the bench, which you're typically not in writing, and B, what is it going to tell you that other things won't? So anyway, I had a lot of questions when I read the piece.
Predict, because I spoke with them about that, like the Predicta people, and just my question to them was like, well, what differentiates you from all the other products out there? And they brought in the whole like, oh, well, we look at their like what kind of neighborhood they live in, what kind of donations that they've had, what kind of socioeconomic backgrounds that they have. So it's just kind of to get like a whole picture of like someone as a person, which made me a little uncomfortable, but whatever. This information's out there, so you might as well look at it. But it's kind of like, well, how many ways are you gonna look at a judge and be like, okay, other than the opinions, how are we going to look at them and be like, okay, well, we're going to look at all these other factors to see how they're going to rule? Like there's only so many things out there that you can look at that's available, unless they're going to go through the garbage or something. I mean, what else is there? I know for Clarence Thomas, they looked at his video rental history, I think. They can't do that now.
Isn't that illegal? I mean,
yeah, like
libraries get into
library
trouble
books.
for giving out people's book lending history.
Yeah,
I don't know. Run it through Niki's "What the heck is up with that" detector.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
There's something to be said in the Predicta. You have to wonder some of it, but there's a little bit of connecting of the dots that could go on that maybe isn't always going on. Like the judge went to X law school, and the lawyer who's appearing before the judge went to X law school. Oh, by the way, they were in the same class at X law school. Right. And is that going to have an influence on the case? Well, both of them would say absolutely not. But is it? Probably. And how do you really prove those things? You can't. But it's certainly good to kind of maybe try and draw some of those connections and see how they might, even statistically, maybe if have an impact on a case. I don't know.
Yeah.
So Bob, he said that the new product says he does rulings that are not reported. I mean, what is he talking about? Because I think all of those opinions actually are reported now. I think there's no such thing as an unreported ruling anymore.
Well,
so
the name of the company is Bench IQ. So he's talking about bench things the judges do from the bench
rulings.
that are orally, verbally, that are not put in writing.
No, they literally went through the trash. It's the draft rule. They're going through all the drafts, just like Victor said. He's onto it. He knows what they're doing.
No, it's not draft. I mean, it's the things they say verbally. It's a judge. It decides a case from the.
And why isn't it on Westlaw?
Often a judge will say, "I'm going to grant this motion." In a hearing, he's going to say, "I'm going to allow the motion," and the clerk will just issue an order, a little one-page sentence, order granted, whatever per hearing yesterday or something.
But
and a lot of times what happens is the ruling is written by the winning lawyer. The judge will say, "Well, just draft me an order for me to sign since you won it." So what does that tell you about? I don't know. Let's see what it holds. But I will say one funny thing. After I read it, I was trying to remember the name of the company Predicta, and I couldn't remember it. So I thought I'll ask ChatGPT, and so I typed in what's the name of the company that looks at publicly available information about the judge. It's not in his opinions, blah blah blah, and it came back and it said, well, that would be Lex Machina, and I said, no, it's not Lex Machina, and they said, well, I can't answer it then. So I went on Google and found out it was Predicta, and I went back and I said, by the way, just so you know for future reference, ChatGPT, the name of the company is Predicta. And it said, oh, yes, Predicta does that. Like 3 paragraphs of what Predicta does.
Well, just on the ruling, a lot of that order information is in dockets, and some of the docket companies are actually looking at judges' orders already. So I'm getting a little skeptical about how unique what they're doing is. So
I will say, having seen this happen in court any number of times myself, where a judge may say they're going to grant an order or something, and then that's what shows up in the docket. But in saying that, the judge may say, well, I've read the cases and I think this, or I think that, or this seems to be at play here and this isn't at play here. Sometimes the judge is verbally expressing some rationale that doesn't make it into any kind of a writing anywhere. It may be the transcript of the hearing, but not anywhere beyond that. So I'm thinking that might be part of what they're going after there.
And is he mostly
Yeah, and if
focused
you-
on federal? Because I mean, there are so many state courts that are nothing's reported on. So I mean, I
Right.
just sort of wonder what's their focus.
It's federal now. They want to get state, but yeah.
Gotta-
Yeah, good luck
Good
to
luck
It'd
them.
with
have to be federal, yeah. I mean, I guess it would be useful if you could somehow
Yeah.
pull out all the written comments of a judge from the bench that in ruling on motions, the questions that he or she asked, the dressing down of the lawyer for whatever. I mean, if you could somehow distill all that, I guess it would be valuable. But that's a huge amount of material, and I don't know how much of that is in transcripts and
Yeah, I
written
mean,
down
and
in
so
emails.
I haven't been in a courtroom in a long time, but is this the stenographer? Somebody is buying the stenographer's notes? I mean, those are really expensive. Where is
Yeah, I
this
don't know.
coming from?
Those I think those are among the secrets we don't know.
Well, let's
and
hope
we'll
that
have
it's
to wait
not
and see.
hiring somebody to like go and sign up for some service and pull all the data out of it and pop it into theirs.
So
Or
it-
somebody
this-
has like a
this
like a
all-
microphone pen and he lays it on the judge's bench.
This sort of reminds me of Catholic school when they got to something they really couldn't explain, they would say it's just a mystery. It's just a mystery.
God's will.
Yeah.
You just need faith.
In my Catholic school, they just taught us not to question anything. If you don't like it here, just go somewhere else.
It's faith.
All right. Well, from whatever we were just talking about to Apple Vision Pro, is it worth the investment for lawyers? Niki, what do you think? Is it?
Unless you are a total geek, probably not. I do have mine. I held out for a whole 2 days after it came out. And so I wrote my Above the Law column this month on whether I think lawyers should
I got
invest
it.
in it.
Yeah, good beat me to it.
Oh, there we go. There, you got it there twice.
double quote.
And I think that right now, no. I do think though that there are a number of things that really set this apart, not just because I'm an Apple fangirl. I bought the MetaQuest goggles a while ago, MetaQuest 2, and I was pretty impressed with the experience and the more so the virtual worlds in terms of MetaQuest. This doesn't really have access to virtual worlds yet, but the interface is very Minority Report-ish. A couple downfalls. First of all, it has an attached battery pack. MetaQuest didn't have that. So you got to carry this thing around that's like the size of an iPhone in your pocket. But it has that interface. You don't need controllers like you do with a MetaQuest. It tracks what your eyes are looking at on the visual interface in front of you. And then you just and it tracks your hands somehow. I don't even know how it does that. They don't have to be within vision of the within the vision, within your line of sight. And you just click on it by just pinching your fingers together, or you type on the keyboard, like actually just touch the virtual keyboard. So it's really cool that way. It's fantastic for watching shows, movies, and so for travel, there's a ton of potential if you don't mind looking like an idiot on the plane, because one thing I point out is you probably need the Apple AirPods, because I have Sony noise canceling AirPods, or not AirPods, but I forget what you call them when that's not using the Apple terminology.
Headphones, earbuds.
Earbuds, yeah, earbuds. And it doesn't work really. It works, but it doesn't sound great. But with the AirPods, it is perfectly compatible, and it's supposed to be great sound.
You didn't like the sound in the Vision Pro itself? I thought it was pretty good.
It's wonderful, but you can sort of hear it a little bit around you. So when
Yeah, I
you're
see, yeah.
traveling, you need to,
I get it. Okay.
abide by the.
It's like bone conduction, right? Is it bone conduction
Yeah,
audio?
it's fantastic. And you can make the screen as big or as small as you want. You can pin it, or you can take it with you. And it's like literally watching the movies. I love it, except that one of the downfalls, which I do want to point out that I also pointed out in the article, was that if you wear glasses as I do, and if you've aged as I have, and you wear progressive lenses, it can present some issues. I also have an astigmatism, so that means that my contacts will correct for the astigmatism, but it's hard to correct for that and the progressive, the far and nearsighted vision. So I just wear glasses now because it corrects for all those issues for me. But with this, you need to correct your vision somehow, and it doesn't fit over your glasses like the MetaQuest one did. So you need to buy these little inserts that fit in here. They go in there. You can buy ones off the shelf that just correct farsightedness so that you can, read up close, which is what I did. It's just off the shelf for $100 extra. Or you can order your prescription that'll correct for far and nearsightedness, but you've got to order it separately. It costs $150, and it only corrects certain types of vision. So what I've done is I just corrected for my farsightedness, and I wear my contacts, which I never wear, but my eyes aren't used to the contacts. So it's a little bit of a pain because my eyes dry out quickly. So I can only use it for so long. But once I do that, it's unbelievable vision. The interface is unbelievable. I haven't tried the Zoom, but I have it set up so that it does it, and it scans your whole face and it creates a 3D version of you. And so I may try it for work at some point. I just think everyone's going to make fun of me. But you log into Zoom through that, and it's this 3D, and as you smile, it smiles and it moves its head with you, and you interact as this virtual person, but it looks like you and it moves like you. So that's kind of cool, especially as the technology advances and it becomes more commonplace, and maybe also as it eventually becomes like sunglasses or contact lenses, that'll make it even better than this sort of bulky thing. But it's very comfortable, all things considered. It fits great. And and the other thing that's really cool about it is that you can, assuming you're going to walk around your house with this thing on all the time or work with it, which is kind of the vision down the road that people will do. You work on your computer, you can have your computer screen you can have it connect with your computer screen. So you put your computer screen in front of you. You can have the, Zoom in front of you and something else in front of you. You can create all these widgets. So if you're walking around with it constantly, over here's the widget that shows the weather for the day, and it stays there. You can put another widget in the other room that does something else, and the TV screen in another place, or multiple screens, like one is Hulu, one is Netflix. You can use, you can cook with it on, you can see around while you're using it. And so as you walk, and then every time you take it off and put it back on, all those screens are in the same place if you don't shut them down. So there's a whole sorts of really cool things about it. And I think it is like sort of the computing of the future. As the tech advances, it's going to be really neat. Just this interacting with, not a screen, you're just interacting. You look like a jerk, but it's very cool. And I don't think lawyers should buy it right now unless they're just interested in it, because it's expensive, $3,500. But it's definitely going to be the computing of the future in some form.
Sounds like it would be a challenge for somebody with ADD.
Yeah,
sure.
I wrote a piece on it when they first came out. I don't have one, but the thing that struck me about it, Niki, was what same thing you said, the computing of the future and the ability to have like multiple screens up at the same time. And when I think, Gene, you were going to talk about the remote work article, but one of the reasons that people like to go to the office is because there's state-of-the-art equipment there. There's double or triple monitors and all of that, and yet this has the capacity to perhaps replace all that. You don't need 3 monitors anymore because you just put them on and they're there. And when you start talking about expenses, yeah, this is an expensive piece of hardware, but if you compare that to the cost of a state-of-the-art computer and 2 or 3 monitors, you start thinking, it's not that far away. But to me, the biggest thing that, in addition to the new way of computing, is it really sort of tilts back toward more remote work capability, and what's that going to do to the demands by law firms to return to the office as I'm sure it'll get cheaper as it gets cheaper and easier to use. So I've not bought one yet, but I'm fighting it.
Well, the sum total of my experience with one of these things is when at Startup Alley at ABA Tech Show, some guy walked up to me after the thing and said, "Would you put these on and let me take your picture?" And which I did, and I've just posted the picture in the link to the picture in the chat. But I then let me play around with it a little bit, and I did the dinosaur thing that you mentioned in your piece. But I wear glasses, obviously, and I just took them off, and I could see perfectly fine. I don't know how it did it, but I had everything was crisp and sharp without my glasses on. So I don't
haven't tried
understand that.
Maybe I'll try that. That never occurred to me. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I
Glad you
just
mentioned that.
So, and the other thing you said, Nikki, I thought was funny. You said, well, I don't want to use it at work because everybody will make fun of me. And I was thinking, that's only until everybody at work uses the same thing.
yeah.
No,
Yeah.
people were saying the same thing about phones. Everyone's going to make fun of people going like this all the time, and like, but now it's a part of life. Everyone does it, and nobody bats an eye over it. I mean, yeah, like I'm kind of with Nikki on this one. It's kind of like, well, for people with like me who I've had astigmatism since I was 8 years old. I've been nearsighted, pretty much my whole life. I've had to get progressives as well. So yeah, it's just the idea of having to then put this thing over my face for something that might actually hinder my vision even more doesn't really appeal to me. But I figure at some point they'll probably figure out how to correct that, and then and at that point then it'll probably become standard for everybody. But it's always funny how we talk about whenever something new comes out and like we see the design and then you contrast that to sort of like what comes later. I mean, you look at like with the old iPods, like this is what they used to look like, and now they're like, well, now they don't really make them anymore. But like now it's like they eventually became smaller and sleeker and more easier to use and whatnot. And so I think it'll be the same thing with these. Like you talk about that big battery pack, that kind of threw me off a little bit. Just like, wow, that seems really clumsy and really kind of annoying to have to carry that around. But at some point they'll figure out a way to kind of integrate that into the main device and not have to worry about having to carry that gigantic thing around. And then we'll be like, well, hey, remember back in the day we had to carry that gigantic battery pack around? That was crazy.
So sort of like remember the first smartphones where they looked like the big shoe. These things are great. Now we're looking at them.
Smart.
No, I think the first cell phone I ever saw was my math teacher had one, and it was like a little briefcase thing where they like the cord coming out of it, and she'd like stand near the window, otherwise she couldn't talk out of it. And we were just like, well, let's just use a regular phone.
Or the center consoles in cars, we'd have to like lift up something, and there would be this big handset in it.
I was going to say there was one girl in high school, like the richest girl in high school, had a car phone, which was this giant thing in the middle, and we were like, "What is that about?"
Anyway, well, I quickly wanted to mention what I actually thought was the biggest story I covered this week, and I'm not just trying to be nice to Niki, but the MyCase, FinnaPay, LawPay news that came out. I thought this was actually a really cool story. On I'm going to put it in chat also, but they came out with, and as Niki and I have talked about it, it's almost sort of hard to describe, so she can help me describe it. But the starting point is it's a credit card, a LawPay credit card for law firms. But it's a credit card with a whole host of modern features that lets you very granularly manage who gets to use the card, what they can use it for, how much they can spend within your law firm. One person can have multiple cards for different purposes. You can set spending limits. You get this wonderful dashboard. You can control all of that and see all of that. But then, to me, in a way, kind of the coolest part is then it integrates right into the MyCase. And so if you take your credit card and you run down to the court to file a document and you use the credit card to pay the filing fee, you get a little text up on your phone says, "We see you just made this purchase at this courthouse for this much." And you can click a little link and go in and edit. This is what matter this was for a client, whether you want to include it send it to MyCase or not. And then it shows up on the matter in MyCase, on the invoice in MyCase, all automatically. And so, it solves the problem of law firms struggling to keep track of expenses, struggling to manage who is spending what, where, when, how. I've never seen anything like this in legal that I know of, and maybe I'm missing something, but I thought it was really kind of cool.
Yeah, well,
so there you go, Niki.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It is like as far as we know as well, the only product like this in legal, and the way that I like to think of it is that, well, you see these headlines where law firms discover that their back office employee embezzled $2 million over the course of like 10 years because they were writing things to cash. They were created fake accounts and, had checks coming in and, or checks going out to those people. And they over time embezzled tons of money. And it's because there weren't checks and balances on those expenses. And what this allows you to do is, we use it all the time at our company. It's called a ramp or a Brex card. There's different brands out there, but you can just issue a one-off credit card to somebody for a conference only. And you can limit the spending only for the things that you would use at a conference. So you wouldn't be able to go and spend it on, I don't know, copying costs if you're not going to do that at the conference. It's just for travel expenses. So, and you put a cap on what they can spend, and it's only certain categories. And you can do this if someone in your firm goes off to a conference. You can issue virtual or real credit cards to different people. And so another example I like to use is, I used to have an HSA card that was a credit card, but it was drew off of our HSA account. And one time I accidentally pulled it out during a wine tasting and it got rejected because drinking wine does not fall under medical expenses. And so the HSA card recognized that this was clearly an unauthorized expense.
Well, that is a shame. That sounds false.
Right? But these credit cards do the same thing, right? So if somebody is only authorized for office expenses and they try to expense a meal or something, it'll get declined because it's the wrong, you get to choose which categories different people can use. So not only does it provide all this visibility and stuff onto expenditures, it also has all those efficiencies of being able to capture all of them and track them and have them sync right into your practice management system.
I thought it was a really cool
for others too.
I thought it was a really cool tool when I read about it too, because it will enable law firms to try to recoup those expenses that they've outlaid. And I mean, that's a real problem for law firms, because you let that go too long, those expenses, I mean, you're out that money, right? I mean, it's come out of your revenue and it's gone. It's not like, you didn't bill for 2 hours for today, okay, you didn't bill, but this, I mean, it's, $1,000 here, there, and everywhere, and you go for too long without getting those reimbursed, and it's a real drain. It's a financial burden. So I like the idea that it's sort of automated that whole process. So you have the expense, it comes out on the next bill, you get it reimbursed, maybe even before you have to pay it, which is really a good idea, I thought.
Yeah, I think for all the modern features that Niki's talking about and everything else, I think for lawyers, what makes it kind of unique is that integration with the practice management platform. Right now it's MyCase. Well, it's not even MyCase yet. It's going to come out soon, but then it'll be CasePeer and other products. And I bet we'll start to see other people emulating this. Let's just hope nobody uses it to put limits on buying drinks for their favorite legal tech journalists, because that would be a travesty.
Agreed. I'll make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay. All right. Well, we are out of time, and it's been great conversation. Thanks to everybody for being here, and thanks to everybody in the audience as usual for their spirited discussion. And we'll be back next week. See you all then.
So long, everyone.
Have a great weekend.